She stood in the corridor of the Terran embassy, her pulse unsteady, her breath catching in her chest as her eyes tracked the human male who had just smiled at her and walked past with no understanding of what he had triggered for him. It was a casual gesture, an ordinary moment, but for her it was like a wave, crashing against the core of her being, igniting reactions that should not exist, not within her kind, not in someone engineered for perfect emotional neutrality. Her skin tingled, her vision shimmered, and her center of gravity seemed to shift as if the world tilted around that single interaction. She turned away, pressed her hand against the wall, trying to steady herself, whispering to no one, "This isn't normal, this isn't normal," but the walls did not answer, and her own body betrayed her further with every racing beat of her heart. She had been bred in the vat cities of Lorinthia, designed for diplomacy, calculation, and absolute control over the body's responses. So why then did her balance betray her? Why did the memory of a smile not meant for her linger like a scent in the air? Why did her stomach tighten like she had been struck with a gravity spear? She stumbled down the corridor, ignoring the stares of aides and guards, her mind screaming for stability, for logic, but nothing about her internal chemistry made sense anymore, and the data scrolling in her ocular implant made it worse. Fluctuating hormone levels, spiking neural patterns, erratic readings, all screaming one thing: she did not want to accept the human had affected her, not with a touch or a word, but with mere presence. And now the code of her very biology began to shatter like glass dropped from orbit. The medical wing of the embassy was sterile and cold, yet the moment she entered, the lights dimmed at her command and analysis protocols engaged automatically, the systems responding to her authority as first attach of Lorenthian interstellar affairs. She lay on the scanning bed, sensors tracing her frame, pulsing soft energy through her tissues, while her eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, and her mind replayed that smile, that flicker of warmth that should have been meaningless. She accessed her logs, began dictating a personal report, her voice flat despite the storm within, stating subject has experienced an anomalous physiological reaction following minor exposure to Terran. Subject male, designation Ethan R. Cole. Suspected trigger is nonverbal gesture, possibly facial expression, involving orbital muscle contraction and dental display. Duration intensity unknown, but effect profound. She paused as the AI stuttered its interpretation, unable to classify what she described in mechanical terms. Her body was in flux, enzymes firing without cue, skin temperature rising, and even her olfactory sensors had started imagining scent trails that had no physical origin. She clenched her jaw, closed the logs, and whispered to herself, "This is not how we are, this is not how I am." But the systems had no answers, only warnings and unreadable data patterns. She needed more than scanners, she needed control. Or failing that, isolation, and she considered requesting temporary removal from Terran contact, but something within her flinched at the idea of distance from the very source of the imbalance, and that scared her more than any data could. The embassy's greenhouse was not a place for meetings, yet it was there she found him again amidst the Terran flora, adjusting the nutrient mist with the tool in hand, his sleeves rolled up, exposing skin that seemed to warm, too alive to be so dangerous. She approached each step uncertain, each breath shallow, until he noticed her, and that smile came again, unthinking, unweaponized, and devastating. She stopped short, caught between fleeing and falling, and she said, "You smiled at me." He tilted his head, clearly confused, and said, "I guess I did. Sorry if that's weird." She shook her head to fast, "No, not weird, just not normal, not to me." He put down the tool and stepped closer, not invading her space, but closing the distance, and she felt it again, that invisible force like magnetism, but deeper, reaching inside her cells. Her breath hitched again, her thoughts unraveling like thread pulled from a tight weave, and she said, "There is something in you, something in all of you, perhaps, but strongest in you, and it is affecting me chemically, structurally, altering because of proximity, and I cannot stop it." He looked at her quietly for a moment, then said, "Is that a bad thing?" And his voice did something to her molecules. She was sure of it, because her knees threatened to give, and her heart rate hit a threshold she had never reached even in training simulations. She wanted to step back, but she also wanted to stay, wanted to understand this gravity he held, and what it meant, that she, a being of logic and code now vibrated with chaos and warmth. She said, I should not want to be near you, and yet I do, and he smiled again, the weapon smile, and said then, stay near me until it stops, or until you don't want it to, and she didn't. Answer, because she didn't trust the truth growing like wild roots inside her. She tried to stay away for 3 cycles, burying herself in work, avoiding shared spaces, cutting off chance encounters, and even filtering scent trails in her personal quarters, but it did not matter, because the damage had been done and her body remembered even if her mind screamed for restraint, and now she dreamed in heat and color and sensations she could not name, with images of him reaching out or simply existing, and the ache of it filled her in quiet moments, so completely she could hardly breathe. She found herself rewriting reports with his name in margins, testing her voice by whispering syllables of his name until her control cracked like fragile glass beneath storm winds, and when she passed him again in the corridor, without plan or excuse, she did not stop herself. He saw her and said nothing, only opened a hand palm up, and she placed hers in it, without thinking, and the contact sent a shock through her nervous system, a kind of inner fire that spread to fast and to real, and she gasped, but did not pull away, and he said softly, I don't know what's happening to you, but I know I feel it too, and that broke her last line of defense, because she realized this wasn't just her reacting, this wasn't just one-sided, this was a loop, a feedback cycle of biological resonance to frequencies sensing despite species barriers, and she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder, whispering, I am losing myself, and he said, or maybe you're finding something that was never allowed to bloom before. They stood beneath alien stars the night before the treaty renewal, and she felt different, not broken, not ruined, but changed. Her structure had adapted, not because of exposure, but because of embrace. The initial reaction had been chaos, yes, but the longer she remained near him, the more the fluctuations became stable, like her body no longer resisted his presence, but built new pathways around it, and she told herself it was science, adaptation, evolution. Yet, when she looked at him, sitting beside her on the embassy's highest terrace, she felt the answer was deeper than biology, and when he reached for her hand, she let him take it, not because of compulsion, but because she wanted to feel that warmth again, wanted to remember that even engineered life could shift with the right catalyst. She spoke aloud this time, saying, my systems no longer warn me of your presence, they now pulse in rhythm with it, and he smiled that smile again, the one that started everything, and said, maybe it means we're more compatible than anyone thought, and she nodded her head slowly, her eyes locked on his, and said, this isn't normal, but I no longer want normal, I want whatever this is with you. And as the stars moved above them, ancient and uncaring, she leaned into the impossible, knowing that sometimes what isn't normal is exactly what the universe was waiting for all along.